Welcome to the fourth installment of my LMS guides. I'll keep the intro short, but there's a few things that you should know about 1 defense no honor Bridding before we get started. Because everyone has level 1 defense, nobody will be hitting many zeros. Because of this, catching freezes and getting your prayers right matters significantly more. Your tank gear in fact matters less, but still has some applications. The fights are also way faster paced, so I'll do my best to break things down slowly. Let me know if you'd like to see a Zerker version of this video by leaving a like and commenting. Let's jump into it then. Upon spawning in, I'm positioned next to my opponent. The obvious move here is to go for a DDS spec. A DDS spec off prayer here will almost ensure that the momentum goes in my favor. The reason I'm in my mage gear here and not praying at this moment is because I want him to think a barrage is coming, and I don't want him to suspect that I'm going to anticipate his attack, even though he's had his dagger out for the last 5 seconds. I hit a massive DDS spec and follow up with another to see how fast he switches his prayer. After his DDS flops, I expect him to bolt me since he's not a very advanced player. He starts to take a massive amount of damage because he's not able to anticipate my attacks. The moment he takes out his mage gear, I start to move closer and DD under him. Doing this makes it so he's less likely to get a freeze off and slow down my momentum. When you find yourself in this position, you should be trying to deal as much damage as possible and try to catch a freeze while also focusing on your prayers. If you can't catch a freeze, then forcing damage to make them eat and focusing on your prayers is your best option. In this instance, a good offense is also a good defense. When your opponent is focused on eating and camping melee prayer, it goes without saying that you want to capitalize on off-prayer attacks. I see him go for a barrage again, so I keep moving around and get within melee distance to keep up the pressure. I stand next to him in anticipation of getting frozen, so I can keep using melee. He starts poking me with his skin, and at this point, I should at least have sipped a brew, as my HP starts to get really low. His auto retaliate chances me here, but we're not going to talk about that. Once I realize my negligence, I DD under and heal up. I also figure that since I'm making these guides, I might as well help this guy out and give him a quick tip. Apparently, I'm also having an aneurysm as I type. I step out from under him and go for a refreeze, but I don't realize he has freeze immunity, and I eat a DDS spec. If you guys don't know what freeze immunity is, it's a period of time, around 5 ticks or 3 seconds, where you can't be refrozen. He doesn't eat as I bolt him, and I've done over 400 damage at this point, so I know he must be low or out of food. I make sure to eat up to full so I can overheal to 115 after I finish him off. I know this first fight wasn't too interesting, but the next 2 opponents are pretty good, so let's see what tactics I employ to take him down. I spot my next opponent as he gets a kill. I make an aggressive move and immediately fall in on him. Doing this usually makes the person with immunity feel rushed, because they know I will attack him the moment I'm able to. So he's given an ultimatum: loot his opponent or loot his key. He makes the right move and chooses to initiate combat and forsake his key. He likely splashes here because I'm in my tank gear, which is only good for tanking mage attacks. The Farcast exchange begins as I begin to read my opponent. He starts to display multiple fakies, so immediately I know I'm not dealing with an average player. He manages to pull off a fakie and a double fakie back to back, catching me off prayer both times. Even before I start running towards him, he already knows I'm going to try to DDS him. Because he anticipated my move here, I prayed melee in response in case he tried to anti me. He catches the freeze, so I eat and immediately try to freeze him in return to try to claim the power position. Take notice of how I suddenly start to predict his fakies. At this point, I've seen his attack patterns enough times to let that information work for me. He risks his HP to try to keep up the damage, but because I'm able to predict his attacks better, this works against him. It's pretty hard to spec a good player off prayer. Knowing this, I elected to spec anyways to force damage so that it keeps eating. I break away because I'm in KO range, and I start to throw barrages at him to try to keep the momentum. He splashes, giving me the green light to risk my HP a little and keep up the damage. My hit starts to noodle, and he's able to get his HP high before becoming unfrozen. As he starts to run at me, I pray melee and double E to get out of KO range. Knives are pretty scary to deal with in the pure mode because they hit fast, hard, and allow you to stack damage with any style. It's pretty common to expect a DDS after a few knives, so I threw on pray melee and end up avoiding a lot of potential damage. I risked my HP pretty hard and tried to surprise him with the DDS spec, but once again, he predicted my attack. This was a fantastic play by him since I didn't think he would be able to anticipate my spec, but as I said before, it's pretty difficult to surprise a good opponent off prayer. I create distance between us to try to regain my footing and to stay away from those knives. During a battle, you should be glancing over at your PvP tracker to see where you stand against your opponent. I know he must be getting low on food since I've done around 350 damage and about 130 damage more than him. As soon as he's unfrozen, he closes the distance to try and utilize his knives again, but I quickly back away and freeze him, rendering his knives useless. But I back away too far and end up breaking his freeze. So I attempt to refreeze him and keep my distance. Once again, we end up in a farcasting battle. This is what has to be done in order to mitigate his knives. If I focus on my prayers and his fakies while trying to keep up damage, I should have a solid chance at victory. As my freeze timer ticks down to 5 seconds, I eat up and prepare for the next phase of battle. At this point, whoever manages to catch the freeze first without getting frozen pretty much takes the W here. He goes for a knife and a freeze, but he would have probably gotten more damage if he went for a bolt and a freeze. Both of us start to feel the pressure as he takes a while to get his barrage off, and I poke him with my DDS. He ends up splashing 2 crucial freezes while I catch mine. At this point, I'm really starting to feel the pressure, so instead of switching to mage where I could either splash or misclick, I choose to go for almost guaranteed damage by bolting him. I quickly eat up and dedicate the rest of my HP to finish the fight. He camps melee prayer because he knows I have specs left, so I take this opportunity to bolt him off prayer and finally put him down. Good fight to that guy. His fakies were pretty good. Pulling off fakies constantly is tiresome, but he just kept pumping them out, managing to keep me on the edge the entire fight. He utilized his advantage as well with the gear he had, and he ended up getting melee prayer on for all my specs. We were both relative in skill to one another. You can tell by the amount of times we hit each other off prayer. A lot of times when players close in skill go up against one another, RNG is the deciding factor. I hit him a few more times off prayer than he at me, and I got more attacks off overall. After the fight, I see there's only one player left standing other than myself, so I loot my opponent quickly. The final player is likely in the end zone, so instead of going to the nearest chest, I make my way south to loot and arrange my inventory in peace. I take the Tormented Bracelet over the Myth Gloves because catching freezes and higher mage strength is more important than range and melee in this mode. I spot my opponent and quickly try to freeze him, but I misclick and end up frozen instead. I splash and I see his VLS, so I pray melee. Now that I'm frozen and he's not, it's really important that I get my prayers right to reduce damage. I fakey my skim and it takes him a while to get his prayer on. At this point, I already know that he's not very receptive with his prayers. His gear is superior to mine and his switches are decent, so it's best not to underestimate him. I spot a chicken dinner waiting for me, so I run over and try to grab the upgrades. I work on freezing him so I can keep looting. I try to deal more damage so that when he's eating, I can grab some more items. My HP gets super low here, and if I didn't have PID, I surely would have died. PID determines whose hits shows up first, and because he didn't have it, I was allowed more time to eat. I heal up while also trying to deal damage back. I waste a Karambol on here, a doublet would have been fine. Nonetheless, my HP is topped off, and I'm ready to turn the heat up on him. I see his cape switch to an Infernal, so I anticipate his VLS here. I break away, and as my opponent leaves my view, I see his VLS aimed at my head, so I pull the old fake run away and spec. I freeze him, and for the first time, I have the power position. I DD under him and risk my HP to hit him off prayer to keep him eating. He camps melee prayer simply because he can't anticipate my moves. After he catches a freeze, he's still praying melee, so I spec him with my knives if he's not going to change his prayer. After I see his attack animation, I eat up to get out of KO range. He flashes his Void Waker and goes into a barrage. It would have been better to flash his VLS since when I see a Void Waker, I pray mage. I catch the freeze and start moving around. I refrain from getting too close since he has a VLS and a Void Waker. I run towards him and fakey a melee attack to prompt his melee prayer. Because I do this, he's left playing catch up on what attack styles I'm going to use, allowing me free hits off prayer. I end up doing so much damage he gets chance as he DDs under me. I turn on Entity Hider and Player Outline to see what he decides to open with. He pot tricks a VLS and gets a nice 53 on me. But Because I hit him off prayer and did a lot of damage before he froze me, he was only able to get one VLS off before my freeze broke. I cast my last barrage at him and he goes down. The main reasons I was able to beat him was, I was able to anticipate around 2/3 of his attacks, and at the same time, I racked up a lot of damage because I caught him off prayer over half the time. In the pure mode, you absolutely cannot afford to miss your prayers. I appreciate everyone who's watched and supported my channel, and thank you for making it this far in the video. It really helps out the algorithm. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed the LMS pure mode breakdowns. But he ended up getting... oh, wait, no, fuck. Fuck.